Hello, Capital H listeners. I'm here at the Gartner Reimagine HR conference in Orlando, meeting with Siobhan Savage, the Chief Executive Officer and founder of Reejig. Really excited to have Siobhan here today to dig into a number of topics. But Siobhan, let's just start with a little bit of an intro for yourself to listeners. I know you've had a fascinating career that led you to becoming the CEO and founder of Reejig. Why don't you talk people through what was your background and then what led you to deciding based on the market moment to jump into being a founder?
So it's not a typical story of a technology company. So I specialized in workforce optimization and workforce strategy. So I worked with a large global engineering firm where I started my career basically helping organize and optimize our workforce, essentially everything from talent acquisition, talent management, talent mobility, and moving work around the business. So projects were our business. So we built big construction projects, big engineering towers, railways and road. And the problem that I had at the time was two things. One, we would go through, and quite like the cycles that we're in right now, these ups and downs of the market, we would have these really big peaks of winning loads of work. And then we would have these massive downs of like, hold on a second, all of these people are being pulled off projects and we're about to demobilize. What do we do? And unfortunately, we didn't have any visibility into how to reallocate that talent. And what ended up happening was an incredible amount of wasted potential. So not only were our people being sort of made redundant and we were sort of letting those folks go, and they came with like the most incredible knowledge, the best CVs, they'd won the best projects, and also they were humans who were being impacted by a redundancy. But also on the other side of our business, we had all of this work that was sitting in other parts of our business in different business groups, and they were crying out for people. So what actually ended up happening was I just couldn't stop obsessing about how come we are an organization of our scale and our size, and how come it's not possible for us to know who our people are and also know what work is happening and move work to worker. Like it sounds so simple, right? But in my mind, it was like, how is that not possible? And that's really where this obsession, my sort of mantra was, this is such a waste of potential. And this is where zero waste to potential came about, where it was like, how come we're wasting the individual's potential, we're wasting the business potential, but also society as a whole. When you go through making any form of change structural in your business, it has this ripple effect that happens into society. It impacts your kids, it impacts families more broadly, and even just the services that they use. So for me, it became a bit of a calling, you could say, where I was like, how do I solve this problem? So that was kind of how the whole thing really just started from like my previous life.
Well, thank you for sharing that, because I think what's so important, you see many founders in the ecosystem who were living in the business, right? They were trying to solve a business problem. They didn't see it getting solved in their company. They look out in the market. They don't see it get solved elsewhere. And so you decide, right, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be the one who solves it. So that led to the founding of Reejig. So you've already mentioned the zero wasted potential tag a little bit, but tell us a little bit more about Reejig in terms of what's the mission of the company? What are the problems that you're trying to solve for your customers?
So our mission at Reejig is to create a world with zero wasted potential. And that means that every single person has access to meaningful work, no matter who you are, no matter what your background, right? We believe in zero wasted potential in your business. So we run companies, and companies are supposed to be busy and optimized, and this is business, right? So how do we have zero waste in our business where we don't have an incredible amount of workforce bloat? And then finally, zero wasted potential in society. So how do we as leaders, as us, as providers of technology and solutions, how do we make sure that we create a recurring impact into society and make sure that we leave no one behind, especially in this new world of work where AI and digital factories are becoming sort of a very regular occurrence in all of our daily conversations. So that's sort of where we really focus our mission and how we have built our product. So think of Reejig as workforce intelligence. So we connect in all of the data that exists on your work and also your worker. Now, where the magic really comes in is we look at work in a much deeper context. So most folks are talking about skills, and skills, yes, are important, but you have to remember that people have skills. Jobs do not have skills. Jobs have tasks, and you require skills to complete the task. So what we do is we look at your work and we understand that work context right down to, we know the job, we know the tasks, we know the skills that are required to complete those tasks, and then we understand the expertise. Because like an example in Deloitte would be that you could have a consultant that specializes in healthcare. Healthcare is not a skill, that's expertise. And it's really important that when you think about workforce intelligence, especially if you are a CHRO or Chief People Officer today, your job is now half digital transformation, half looking after your workforce. And in this new world, you're going to require workforce intelligence to help you make decisions on whether it's a fixed worker, one of your employees, whether it's a flex worker, or whether it's a digital worker. So from a workforce strategy perspective, it's really important for chief people officers to really have workforce intelligence to think about where they bring in their fixed workers, where do they bring work to their flex workers, and then from a digital worker perspective, whether that's generative AI, whether that's agents, or whether that's robotics, how do we think about the impacts? And workforce intelligence really is what will power every major decision when it comes to this new world of work.
Siobhan, what I really like about what you have just shared and this focus on the work is that when people look back at prior inflection points in technology, the introduction of the internet, the introduction of the Ford Model T line, right? What did that do? It impacted the work, right? What was the person doing? And yes, then the skills changed and evolved and there were new jobs and new roles and new tasks, but it fundamentally started at the work. So right now, as you look at this inflection point with AI, having the true understanding of the work and the task level impact of AI, that actually starts to help think about, from a workforce adoption perspective, you can go to an employee or a worker, right, whether full-time, fixed, et cetera, and say, here are the tasks that are changing. Here's how we're going to help you navigate that extra free time, right? So one of the things that I really love about the zero wasted potential tagline is that helps to start framing it in a positive angle for workers, right? This solution will help you still achieve your career aspirations or not waste your potential. One of the things that I think is important to touch on relative to what you all are doing as well, though, is how you're doing this from an ethical AI framework perspective, because I know there's a lot of conversation in the market relative to how do workers trust the AI or the data model or the various things that are being done. So can you share a little bit about Reejig's ethical AI framework and how that ties then into the work ontology and the things you're doing with your customers?
Sure. And I think the zero wasted potential becomes like a compass for our organization on how we make decisions. So when we first started the organization, it was really focused on how do we solve the problem. And then one of the things that I kind of fell down, and I tend to fall down rabbit holes quite a lot. And my background's HR. My background is from the people space. And I was working with a lot of vendors and you get told a lot of things. And for me, what was really important was, how do I know that I'm not going to impact an individual? How do I know that every decision that I make with the technology that I build will make sure that no one is harmed, that the decisions are made on skills and potential and not someone's personal characteristics? And how do I make sure that every redundancy is an opportunity for a pivot? That was the thing that I became so obsessed with. And one of the things that the more I fell down that rabbit hole, that I started to realize that actually when you think about AI, especially with the organizations that have been built to date, unfortunately, they all look very similar. And how do you make sure that the decisions that you're training your AI on, because at the end of the day, AI is not the magician that everyone's talking about. You need good quality data on your workers and you need good quality data on your work in order to make a good decision of how you make a recommendation, right? And if you don't have good data on both sides, the algorithms are not great. And secondly, if you train your algorithms on data that looks like all of the same type of people, what do you think is going to happen? It is only going to give you that type of... Exactly.
Yep.
So what we really focused on was, how do we, as much as possible, how do we make sure... And look, this is 5 years ago that we did this. We had sold our houses. We put everything on the line because I was like, I'm not going to deploy this technology and I want to work for the best companies in the world. And the best companies in the world, they're going to care about AI in the future, and they're going to care that the decisions that are being made on their behalf are good and fair and not going to cause any harm. And we really, truly believed that, or we wouldn't have done that 5 years ago. And what we ended up doing is we went through this massive process. And what we found was there was all of these AI frameworks. Everybody was talking about, here are the frameworks that you need to meet in terms of your guidelines. But frameworks are like marking your own homework. If I give that to my team and I say, audit our AI, but use these frameworks, that's like marking your own homework.
Yep.
And for us, what we wanted, like you get Deloitte to look at your taxes. How do we have an independent body that looks at our algorithms and can make a decision where we are not connected to this organization, that they can actually lift up the hood and have a glass box? That was kind of the vision. So we went down a very long and costly process to have our AI independently audited. Now, you can imagine doing that while building your company, how much pressure that put us under.
It's a bold move.
Yeah, but this is where zero wasted potential. I know you mentioned it was a tag lag. Like, it's not a tag lag.
Yeah,
it's a true mission, vision, purpose, why we exist. And as long as I'm here and as long as the founders are here, we're going to make sure that it's baked right through every experience that we build within our organization and in our technology as well. And, the laws have now changed, which is great. So the laws have now changed that you're seeing. The New York law has now been passed, which is great because what it does is it set the benchmark for everyone else to get to that same level. So,
and you built it from the beginning. So now you don't have to worry about reactively.
Where you have to worry about then is the data drift. And if you go into new regions and if you start to look at new demographics and industries, and we're doing this massive project in Africa right now, and you have to really go back and rework all of your AI to make sure that it's matching and looking at the demographic of the community that you're actually serving from your algorithms. So there's a lot of that. We do it regularly in each region, each state. And you'll see now the EU, there's APAC rules coming in Australia. This will become like GDPR.
Last I heard, there was 200 plus regulations around the world being contemplated. And there's probably more to come.
Yeah, and Europe will hold the highest bar because of Workers' Council, because Europeans typically have had the highest levels of regulation when it comes to data and privacy. Look at GDPR. So what we have told the team is be at that level. Be compliant at that level, and then we know that we're always striving to be as good as we can be. But honestly, it really comes down to not because a law, like we did this 5 years ago when there was no law and you could do what you wanted, and it cost me a lot of money. So we were real when we did it. And because of that, we built trust with customers where any CHRO or chief people officer that's going on this journey right now, as much as you hear a lot of skills-based marketing, this is new. People are still right at the beginning of this new way of thinking, this new world of work, right? Yeah. And if you think about someone taking risk to then put decisions in the hand of a technology, and our vision is, imagine you're driving along in your car and you've got someone in the passenger side seat whispering in your ear and what move to take. That is the best state of where we would like to get to from AI. But you got to trust the person in the passenger side seat whispering in your ear, right? Yeah. So if you think about the chief people officer or the CHRO right now, they got to be able to trust that whatever is whispering in their ear is going to make a good and fair decision and is not going to leave anyone behind. So that's really, I get a little bit hyped about that because I'm very passionate about it. I think a lot of window dressing can happen in this type of space where we believe that it's the right thing to do. And I have learned coming from HR I've now built a company. I have built AI. I've built ethical AI. I have now adopted a lot of AI into my own workforce.
Right.
I have learned from a HR perspective, I've had I like a lot of just on time learning. It's like a simulator that you put me into to see what will happen if she gets put in this box and what's the test?
Yeah. Well, I want to go into what you mentioned a little bit right there as well. This is not something that you've just been building and deploying with customers. You've been living it yourself, right? Making sure you understand what it's like to use your own products to put that zero wasted potential in action in the company. Can you share a little bit about the journey that you've been on within the organization and how you've taken those lessons learned back out to your customers?
Yeah. And like this one, it took me a while to get comfortable telling this story, to be honest, because it felt like a pretty vulnerable place to be. So we had just taken investment from Salesforce. So we were on the grow and everything was, at that point in what would have been 2 years ago, the markets were good. We hadn't hit that grenade, hadn't hit the side yet of the markets, and we were building the business. Now, on reflection, I'm a workforce strategist. So when I say this, I built my company wrong. I was just putting people into positions and I wasn't stopping to think about anything because we were really building as fast as we could to deliver for the demand that we created in market, right? So we were doing a lot of that. But then what we found was as AI started to come in, and I told you I go down rabbit holes.
Yeah.
Another rabbit hole was there was all this talk starting to come through, and Gen AI hadn't really come out like full blown yet, but I was starting to track a lot of it. And then I got early access and I wanted to play around. And for me, like if I don't have my hands on it and I can't physically talk about it, then I'm going to struggle to have a convincing empathy type conversation with anyone that I'm talking to. So what I did was I spent a lot of time going, is this real? Like, does this have the potential? Because we've all been told the future of work is coming and AI is going to take over all the jobs. There's been a narrative that we've all talked about for years. But I really was like, okay, this could be that once in a generation moment that we've all been talking about that actually could be like real. And I need to know is this real? Like, is it? So I spent a lot of time playing, a lot of time with my data team. So one of my co-founders, she's got a PhD in machine learning. So you can imagine we were highly experimenting. And then what happened was obviously the market did start to crash. And it was kind of like the perfect storm of things happening. So on one side, I had the pressure of building a company and having shareholders. On the other side, I was looking at this AI thing and going, holy moly, here's an opportunity that this could be really real. Like we were like doing some really cool stuff with it really early. And then the third thing was happening was we were looking at our customers and we had our version 1 of Reejig. We had the same as everyone else, one skills cloud, inferring skills, extracting skills on people and in jobs. And what we were finding was our customers had no job data. And if they did, it was pretty rubbish. And the matches weren't super great. And matches only are great and career pathways are only great if you got good quality data. So this was happening at the same time. So we had this situation where we had like this kind of perfect thing. And then the fourth thing that collided the whole thing together was we basically were looking at where could AI have the impact? And we looked at what are the skills that will have the highest impact for AI? And it was terrible. Using our own models, right? We looked at all of my company, we looked at all of the jobs that we had, and we looked at the skills that our jobs had, and it was terrible. And so you had these four things happening at the same time. And then I'm in Paris meeting a customer. And I'm on my own. And it's probably the best thing is to get you out of your normal mode. And I was in a completely different situation and I just couldn't sleep because I was like, hold on a second. One, this AI thing, this is real. And AI does not automate skills. AI automates tasks.
Right.
And that was like the lightning bolt moment where it was like, hold on a second. And then when I started looking at AI doesn't automate skills, it automates tasks. Then I went into my customers and I was like, okay, let's figure out why your matches are not good. We kept finding that the context of work was missing for the match. And what does work have? Tasks. And what do you require? Skills to do the task.
Right.
So then I'm like sitting on this information going, hold on a second. So what we ended up doing was we pulled the handbrake on. We said, everyone stop. We're going to stop and we're going to do day zero. We're going to imagine that we were building with what we now have learned and our experience and everything that's available in the world. We were building this today. What would we build? And we designed something very different, which we call the work ontology.
Yep.
And the work ontology is where you have every industry, you have every single task for every job, the skills required to do those, and the expertise required. And what we ended up finding was when I looked at that across my business, we started to see, for instance, in our sales team, over 80% of the tasks that my sales team were doing was to book demos. All they were doing was sending an email or a LinkedIn message to ask for a meeting. And the volume was low, the quality was not great.
Yep.
So that was the first place that we went to where we were like, we're paying a really big sales team right now. And we're not getting a lot of what you would expect. So what if we looked at the role and reinvented the role? And actually it's less about the role. It's like, what was the work that was being done? And then how do I think about it? And obviously generative AI has the most perfect opportunity for like the sales, the marketing, the customer success. So we basically found the path that actually automated a lot of the work that was being done before. So that was when we started to see we're now saving 1.6 million a month in my company just from this change. And our margins are better than they've ever been before. We are earning more money than we've ever been before. We are faster than we ever are before. It's unbelievable. And we are like literally we haven't even started yet.
Yeah.
Like we're just scratching the surface of what's possible. So for me, what ended up happening was I started sharing this in public. And what started happening was I started getting all these inbound messages saying, hey, the thing that you've just built in your company, we're like a big pharma company or we're a big bank and we actually have the same problem. Can you come in and talk to us and we'll pay you to come in and talk? And I was like, no, you don't need to pay me. Just buy my software. But what ended up happening was people started getting, I don't know, like inspired or like a different perspective of like, here is what's possible. And for us then, when we built out the work ontology, it started then making a difference in our matches. Our career pathways got better. We could do then AI potential. So the thing that I did in my company, we know I released a product that can tell you for every single one of your jobs, what are all the tasks? And then what is the AI potential? And I'm talking not just Gen AI, I'm talking robotics, I'm talking digital factories. Exactly.
Which is
where
important.
is that potential? And it's not because I'm going to come in and build them. That'll be business number 2.
Yeah.
But it's where is actually the potential for you to think about it? Because what's happening right now is CEOs and chief people officers and chief transformation officers, they're basically saying, okay, we're going to become AI first and we're going to do this. And that's really great. And it's really bold and really exciting. But what they're doing is they're doing this massive spray and pray across their business where people are just buying millions of dollars worth of technology. They have no idea what the purpose is. They're overwhelming the employees because they've got 20 million different systems to go into.
Yep.
And what we're saying is absolutely be bold. Be bold and reinvent your workforce, because if you don't, companies like me, we're going to come and get you. Right? Like there's people like me that are building right now and we're going to kick your ass. So this is your opportunity to build in a different way. So basically, you need to be surgical on your approach of your transformation. So look at where is the highest potential areas. And then what you need to do is be really responsible. So you take that roadmap to your CEO and you say, here is, based on cost and pain, the best places for us to think about AI or that new sort of workforce DNA. But you need to make sure that you're working alongside your chief learning officer.
Yeah.
Because anything that has that AI impact, we need to look at the pivot. So that point I made, every redundancy is an opportunity for a pivot. How do we pivot folks into more meaningful work? So whether this is a full augmented role, whether this is like the role is completely gone, or whether it's just enhancing certain parts of the task, you need that data to be known within your people team and within your learning team so that they can design then what are the future jobs based on where we're going to remove tasks and the net new task curation. What is the new skills that we need to build? And we believe organizations now need to become skill building powerhouses. And if not, they're going to be left behind.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and Siobhan, 2 or 3 things that I want to make sure folks take away, and part of what you just shared. Number one, on the founder CEO story, the knowledge that sometimes taking a step back to really pause and say, are we doing the right thing? Do we need to pivot the business? Right? Which you did. It's hard, right?
It is like bravery.
But that has led to a totally different potential for you all as a company. So kudos. And thank you for sharing. Second, the whole customer zero mindset and approach, right? You're able to say, we are living this now. Therefore, being a couple more steps ahead on the journey gets you that credibility with others, right? And then number 3, I think what again goes back to that acknowledgement of the pivot and the focus on the task and the work ontology is everything that has been going on in the market for the last 2 years. And Deloitte, in our quarterly State of Gen AI in the Enterprise report over 2024, has been tracking low workforce adoption. Some of that, largely, you can even look over the last 20 years of technology and say, when new technology gets introduced, how good is the workforce adoption? Well, what is the organization doing to help the workforce understand, here's how your job is changing, here's how the work is changing, here's what that means to your career path and the skills needed, et cetera, right? But part of that, probably in the past, is the data wasn't always there to say, here's new technology, here's the impact to you, person A, in country B, in job function C. Now that data exists in a new and different way, right? And by being able to bring that data-based approach to leaders, managers, workers, et cetera, you're able to have a very different conversation relative to, and here's where you go next, right? As the 10 tasks you do today, 3 are changing, 7 are remaining. Where do we take that time and allocate it elsewhere?
Yeah. Here's the thing. So when you think about the really bold side of what you've just mentioned, right? Yes, bold, scary. Yes. What I got wrong was the impact to the individuals.
Sure.
So my mode at that moment was very much so reinvent fast, because we're a company that's building and I've got a lot of responsibilities. And where you find these golden nuggets of opportunity to optimize, unfortunately, there's a shadow side of that.
Sure.
That not a lot of people currently will talk about. It's not being talked a lot about in market because it's not a good side of the story. And the good side is when you think about AI adoption or you think about changing your workforce DNA, you're ultimately going to impact people. And I did. So we made changes within that team. And the learning that I had out of that was one that's an individual and zero waste. It felt like a bit of a fraud feeling for me. Like I'm into zero waste to potential, but I've yet done that. That was kind of the feeling. And then when I reflect now, kind of with a bit more kind of empathy to myself and insight, like every CEO and every chief people officer is going to have this kind of golden and shadow side right now. There's this opportunity for them to reinvent their workforce. But on the other side, there's the shadow side, which is how does this impact folks? What does that do?
Sure.
And there will be people that will be impacted. And I think the lesson I would share, and this is why I love the reports and even the conversations that we've been having, your folks are very focused on the individual. And the transparency to the individual about where the impact is, I think is transformational, because A lot of people think it's up to the company to navigate an individual. I actually think it's like a bit of a three-legged stool. I think it's the individual having the information to be able to navigate themselves.
Yep.
I think it's the business, whether that's the HR folks, the learning team, etc., where their role is to create strategies where they become this skill-building powerhouse.
Sure.
And then it's the manager's job to then advocate and enable that new change. And I'm a very different use case to like a big company, the companies we work for. But the thing that people can learn from my experience is my decision was pretty handbrake moment, and I make decisions fast. And when you're not in a corporate, you're not a Navy ship, you can move with the pace.
Sure.
One of the things I think folks need to think about is everyone knows that AI is here. So how are you communicating that conversation within your business? Because if you pretend it's not happening and you're squirreling away in the background to make change, there's going to be a point where the CEO or the leaders of the business and share price will be impacted. And I truly believe that like ESG was a really big thing around net zero when it comes to energy. Honestly, we've seen nothing yet. I am so in that I believe this is a once in a generation change in the world. And it's going to be like electric, and workforces are going to change more than we've ever seen before. And the CEOs who are not being bold and responsible, who are harvesting people out of work, who are not communicating, we are grown-ups.
Right.
They read the paper.
Right.
They're on social media. They understand what's going on in the world. So the challenge, and this is where it's like, how much do you tell the individual the impacts? How much do you even know?
Sure.
Because most companies don't even have a clue about what's even happening within their company right now, never mind what the AI impacts. And one of the things after our conversation, I was thinking about like, what's my role to play in this world where I've got the data that I can tell you where your impact is today? Should I tell you that? And we've started playing on social media where we're starting to share a lot more of our data. Because I ultimately feel like we have a social responsibility to at least put it out there. And I'm not doing it on behalf of a customer. I'm doing it because I'm Siobhan Savage and I can do it. But like as a company, what's the company's role in this conversation? And that's the part I haven't heard a lot of folks talk about, because I'm watching a lot of transformations happening, but there's no one, it's kind of like silently happening. What do you think?
Well, Siobhan, one of the things that at Deloitte we did research on with our 2024 Global Human Capital Trends Report is this premise of businesses that focus on human outcomes and business outcomes at the same time will be more successful. Historically, there has been probably an over-rotation on the business outcomes, right? I need to take ABC action to deliver on savings, shareholder price change, you name it, right? But at the same time, if you think about what are the human implications of some of those business actions, you're the shadow impact or the other side, right? Well, Siobhan, listening to the Gartner keynote as they were opening this Reimagine HR conference, a few different data points that were shared. The number of years companies are in the S&P 500 has dropped from 6 to 2. Pace of change, how do companies react? New entrants coming in, ones that have been around for a while, maybe coming out. And how do businesses continue to proactively navigate when the speed at which new businesses can get stood up has increased dramatically because the cost has gone down dramatically due to trends with things like cloud, AI, having agents in your workforce to do things versus always needing people in the beginning as you go to scale, so to speak. The CHRO leading, right, this human-first approach to the topic of AI and automation broadly, right? Not all just generative AI, but all those different automation capabilities. And how does that collaboration with the CIO, with the CFO, due to the massive investment that's happening in the space, happen together? So it was pretty fascinating to listen to that keynote and then move into this conversation. So, Siobhan, this has been a tremendous conversation. I really appreciate you joining. I think day one at Gartner here, the message that you have right now really ties to what some of the Gartner research is sharing that Gartner has seen over the course of 24. And I think that sets the stage for 25 in a very interesting way for people. So I would highly encourage folks to continue to engage with Siobhan's messages. We appreciate everything that you're doing on that front and truly appreciate you joining us here on the Capital H podcast. And I know we'll be continuing to engage in the space going forward. So appreciate it.
No, I love it. And thank you for the opportunity to tell everyone about zero waste to potential.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you, Capital H listeners, and stay tuned for more.
This podcast is produced by Deloitte. The views and opinions expressed by podcast speakers and guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of Deloitte. This podcast provides general information only and is not intended to constitute advice or services of any kind. For additional information about Deloitte, please go to deloitte.com/about.